The Revolt of Islam, Percy Bysshe Shelley, Canto 7. So we state joyous as the morning ray, which fed upon the wrecks of night and storm, now lingering on the winds, light airs did play, among the dewy weeds the sun was warm, and we sate linked in the inwoven charm of converse and caresses sweet and deep, speechless caresses, talk that might disarm time, though he wield the darts of death and sleep, and those thrice mortal barbs in his own poison steep. I told her of my sufferings and my madness, and how awakened from that dreamy mood by liberty's uprise, the strength of gladness came to my spirit in my solitude, and all that now I was, while tears pursued each other down her fair and listening cheek, fast as the thoughts which fed them like a flood from sun-bright dales, and when I ceased to speak, her accents soft and sweet the pausing air did wake. She told me a strange tale of strange endurance, like broken memories of many a heart woven into one, to which no firm assurance, so wild were they, could her own faith impart. She said that not a tear did dare to start from the swollen brain, and that her thoughts were firm when from all mortal hope she did depart, borne by those slaves across the ocean's term, and that she reached the port without one fear infirm. One was she among many there, the thralls of the cold tyrant's cruel lust, and they laughed mournfully in those polluted halls. But she was calm and sad, musing alway on loftiest enterprise, till on a day the tyrant heard her singing to her lute, a wild and sad and spirit-thrilling lay, like winds that die in wastes, one moment mute, the evil thoughts it made, which did his breast pollute. Even when he saw her wondrous loveliness, one moment to great nature's sacred power, he bent and was no longer passionless. But when he bade her to his secret bower be borne, a loveless victim, and she tore her locks in agony, and her words of flame and mightier looks availed not, then he bore again his load of slavery, and became a king, a heartless beast, a pageant and a name. She told me what a loathsome agony is that when selfishness mocks love's delight, foul as in dreams' most fearful imagery, to dally with the mowing dead that night, all torture, fear, or horror made seem light, which the soul dreams or knows, and when the day shone on her awful frenzy from the sight, where like a spirit in fleshy chains she lay, struggling, aghast and pale, the tyrant fled away. Her madness was a beam of light, a power which dawned through the rent soul, and words it gave, gestures and looks, such as in whirlwinds bore, which might not be withstood, whence none could save, all who approached their sphere, like some calm wave vexed into whirlpools by the chasms beneath, and sympathy made each attendant slave fearless and free, and they began to breathe deep curses like the voice of flames far underneath. The king felt pale upon his noonday throne. At night 2 slaves he to her chamber sent. One was a green and wrinkled eunuch, grown from human shape into an instrument of all things ill, distorted, bowed and bent. The other was a wretch from infancy, made dumb by poison, who naught knew or meant but to obey. From the far isles came he, a diver lean and strong, of Oman's coral sea. They bare her to a bark, and the swift stroke of silent rowers clove the blue moonlight seas, until upon their path the morning broke. They anchored then, where, be there calm or breeze, the gloomiest of the drear, simple gleeds shakes with the sleepless surge, the Ethiop there wound his long arms around her, and with knees like iron clasped her feet, and plunged with her among the closing waves, out of the boundless air. Swift as an eagle stooping from the plain of morning light into some shadowy wood, he plunged through the green silence of the main, through many a cavern which the eternal flood had scooped as dark lairs for its monsters brood, and among mighty shapes which fled in wonder, and among mightier shadows which pursued his heels, he wound until the dark rocks under he touched a golden chain. A sound arose like thunder, a stunning clang of massive bolts redoubling beneath the deep, a burst of waters driven as from the roots of the sea, raging and bubbling, and in that roof of crags the space was riven, through which there shone the emerald beams of heaven, shot through the lines of many waves inwoven, like sunlight through acacia woods at even, through which this way the diver having cloven, passed like a spark sent up out of a burning oven. And then, she said, he laid me in a cave above the waters, but that chasm of sea, a fountain round and vast, in which the wave imprisoned boiled and leaped perpetually, down which one moment resting he did flee, winning the adverse depth, that spacious cell, like an Hyperborean temple, wide and high, whose airy dome is inaccessible, was pierced with one round cleft through which the sunbeams fell. Below the fountain's brink was richly paven with the deep swelth coral and pearl, and sand like spangling gold and purple shells engraven, with mystic legends by no mortal hand left there when thronging to the moon's command. The gathering waves rent the Hesperian gate of mountains, and on such bright floor did stand columns and shapes like statues, and the state of kingless thrones which earth did in her heart create. The fiend of madness which had made its prey of my poor heart was lulled to sleep a while. There was an interval of many a day, and a sea-eagle brought me food for the while, whose nest was built in that untrodden isle, and who to be the jailer had been taught of that strange dungeon, as a friend whose smile like light and rest at morn and even is sought, that wild bird was to me, till madness misery brought. The misery of a madness slow and creeping, which made the earth seem fire, the sea seem air, and the white clouds of noon, which oft were sleeping in the blue heaven so beautiful and fair, like hosts of ghastly shadows hovering there. And the sea-eagle looked a fiend, who bore thy mangled limbs for food. Thus all things were transformed into the agony which I wore, even as a poisoned robe around my bosom's core. Again I knew the day and night were fast fleeing, the eagle and the fountain and the air, another frenzy came. There seemed a being within me, a strange load my heart did bear, as if some living thing had made its lair. Even in the fountains of my life a long and wondrous vision wrought from my despair, then grew like sweet reality among in visionary woes, an unreposing throng. Methought I was about to be a mother. Month after month went by, and still I dreamed that we should soon be all the one another. I had my child, and still new pulses seemed to beat beside my heart, and still I deemed there was a babe within. And when the rain of winter through the rifted cavern streamed, methought after a lapse of lingering pain I saw that lovely shape which near my heart had lain. It was a babe beautiful from its birth. It was like thee, dear love, its eyes were thine, its brow, its lips, and so upon the earth it laid its fingers, as now rest on mine, thine own beloved. 'Twas a dream divine, even to remember how it fled, how swift, how utterly might make the heart repine. Though 'twas a dream, then Cynthia did uplift her looks on mine, and if some doubt she sought to shift, A doubt which would not flee, a tenderness of questioning grief, a source of throbbing tears, which having passed as one whom sobs oppress, she spoke. Yes, in the wilderness of years her memory, aye, like a green home appears. She suckled her fill, even at this breast, sweet love. For many months I had no mortal fears. Methought I felt her lips and breathe approve. It was a human thing which to my bosom clove. I watched the dawn of her first smiles, and soon, when zenith stars were trembling on the wave, or when the beams of the invisible moon or sun, from many a prism within the cave, their gem-born shadows to the water gave, her looks would hunt them, and with outspread hand, from the swift lights which might that fountain pave, she would mark one and laugh when that command, slighting it, lingered there, and could not understand. Methought her looks began to talk with me, and no articulate sounds, but something sweet her lips would frame, so sweet it could not be, that it was meaningless. Her touch would meet mine, and our pulses calmly flow, and beat in response while we slept. And on a day when I was happiest in that strange retreat, with heaps of golden shells we two did play, both infants weaving wings for time's perpetual way. Ere night, methought, her waning eyes were grown, weary with joy and tired with our delight. We on the earth, like sister twins, lay down on one fair mother's bosom. From that night she fled, like those illusions clear and bright, which dwell in lakes when the red moon on high pours ere it wakens tempest and her flight. Though 'twas the death of brainless fantasy, yet smote my lonesome heart more than all misery. It seemed that in the dreary night the diver who brought me thither came again and bore my child away. I saw the waters quiver when he so swiftly sunk as once before. Then morning came, it shone even as of yore, but I was changed, the very life was gone. Out of my heart I wasted more and more. Day after day, and sitting there alone, vexed the inconstant waves with my perpetual moan. I was no longer mad, and yet methought my breast was swollen, changed in every vein. The blood stood still one moment while that thought was passing. With a gush of sickening pain, it ebbed even to its withered springs again, when my one eyes in stern revolve, I turned from that most strange delusion, which would fain have waked the dream from which my spirit yearned with more than human love, then left it unreturned. So my reason was restored to me. I struggled with that dream, which like a beast, most fierce and beauteous in my memory, had made its lair, and on my heart did feast. But all that cave and all its shapes possessed by thoughts which could not fade, renewed each one some smile, some look, some gesture which had blessed me heretofore. I, sitting there alone, vexed the inconstant waves with my perpetual moan. Time passed, I know not whether months or years, for day nor night nor change of seasons made its note, but thoughts and unavailing tears, and I became at last even as a shade, a smoke, a cloud on which the winds have preyed, till it be thin as air, until one even a nautilus upon the fountain played, spreading his azure sail where breath of heaven descended not, among the waves and whirlpools driven. And when the eagle came, that lovely thing, oaring with rosy feet its silver boat, fled near me as for shelter on slow wing. The eagle hovering o'er his prey did float, but when he saw that I with fear did note his purpose, preferring my own food to him, the eager plume subsided on his throat. He came where that bright child of sea did swim, and o'er it cast in peace his shadow broad and dim. This wakened me, it gave me human strength and hope. I know not whence or wherefore rose, but I resumed my ancient powers at length. My spirit felt again like one of those like thine, whose fate it is to make the woes of humankind their prey. What was this cave? Its deep foundation no firm purpose knows, immutable, resistless, strong to save, like mind, while yet it mocks the all-devouring grave. And where was Leon? Might my heart be dead, while that far dearer heart could move and be, or whilst over the earth the pall was spread, which I had sworn to rend, I might be free, could I but win that friendly bird to me, to bring me ropes, and long in vain I sought, by intercourse of mutual imagery of objects, if such aid he could be taught, but fruit and flowers and boughs, yet never ropes he brought. We live in our own world, and mine was made from glorious fantasies of hope departed. Aye, we are darkened with their floating shade, or cast a lustre on them time imparted. Such power to me, I became fearless-hearted. My eye and voice grew firm, calm was my mind, and piercing like the morn. Now it has darted its lustre on all hidden things behind yon dim and fading clouds, which load the weary wind. My mind became the book through which I grew wise in all human wisdom, and its cave, which like a mine I rifled through and through, to keep the keeping. To me the keeping of its secrets gave one mind, the type of all, the moveless wave, whose calm reflects all moving things that are, necessity and love and life, the grave and sympathy, fountains of hope and fear, justice and truth, and time and the world's natural sphere. And on the sand would I make signs to range these woofs, as they were woven of my thought, clear elemental shapes whose smallest change a subtler language within language wrought, the key of truths which once were dimly taught in old Crotona, and sweet melodies of love in that lorn solitude I caught from mine own voice in dream, when thy dear eyes shone through my sleep, and did that utterance harmonise. Thy songs were winds whereon I fled at will, as in a winged chariot o'er the plain of crystal youth, and thou wert there to fill my heart with joy, and there we sate again on the grey margin of the glimmering main, happy as then, but wiser far, for we smiled on the flowery grave in which were lain fear, faith, and slavery, and mankind was free, equal and pure, and wise in wisdom's prophecy. For to my will my fancies were as slaves, to do their sweet and subtile mysteries, and oft from the bright fountain shadowy waves they would make human throngs gather and rise, to combat with my flowing eyes, and voice made deep with passion. Thus I grew familiar with the shock and the surprise and war of earthly minds, from which I drew the power which has been mine to frame their thoughts anew. And thus my prison was the populous earth, where I saw even as misery dreams of morn, before the east was given its glory birth, religion's pomp made desolate by the scorn of wisdom's faintest smile, and thrones uptorn and dwellings of mild people interspersed within undivided fields of ripening corn, and love made free, a hope which we have nursed even with our blood and tears, until its glory burst. All is not lost, there is some recompense, for hope whose fountain can be thus profound, even throned evil's splendid impotence, girt by its hell of power, the secret sound of hymns to truth and freedom, the dread bound of life and death, pass fearlessly and well, dungeons wherein the high resolve is found, racks which degraded woman's greatness tell, and what may else be good and irresistible. Such are the thoughts which, like the fires that flare in storm, encompassed isles we cherish, yet in this dark ruin such were mine even there, as in its sleep some odorous violet, while yet its leaves with nightly dew are wet, breathes in prophetic dreams of day's surprise, Or as a Scythian frost in fear has met spring's messengers descending from the skies, the buds foreknow their life, this hope must ever rise. So years had passed when sudden earthquake rent the depth of ocean and the cavern cracked with sound, as if the world's wide continent had fallen in universal ruin racked, and through the clefts streamed in one cataract. The stifling waters when I woke, the flood whose banded waves that crystal cave had sacked was ebbing round me, and my bright abode before me yawned a chasm desert and bare and broad. Above me was the sky, beneath the sea I stood upon a point of shattered stone, and heard loose rocks rushing tumultuously with splash and shock into the deep. Anon all ceased, and there was silence wide and lone. I felt that I was free. The ocean spray quivered beneath my feet. The broad heavens shone around, and in my hair the winds did play, lingering as they pursued their unimpeded way. My spirit moved upon the sea like wind, which round some tiny cape will lag and hover, though it can wake the still cloud and unbind the strength of tempest. Day was almost over, when through the fading light I could discover a ship approaching. Its white sails were fed with the north wind, its moving shade did cover the twilight deep. The mariners in dread cast anchor when they saw new rocks around them spread. And when they saw one sitting on a crag, they sent a boat to me. The sailors rowed in awe through many a new and fearful jag of overhanging rock, through which there flowed the foam of streams that cannot make abode. They come and questioned me, but when they heard my voice, they became silent, and they stood and moved as men in whom new love had stirred deep thoughts. So to the ship we passed without a word. The Revolt of Islam by Perseus Shelley, Canto 8. I sat beside the steersman then, and gazing upon the west, cried, "Spread the sails, behold! The sinking moon is like a watchtower blazing over the mountains, yet the city of gold yon cape alone does from the sight withhold. The stream is fleet, the north breathes steadily beneath the stars, they tremble with the cold. Ye cannot rest upon the dreary sea, haste, haste to the warm home of happier destiny." The mariners obeyed, the captain stood aloof, and whispering to the pilot said, "Alas, alas, I fear we are pursued by wicked ghosts, a phantom of the dead. The night before we sailed came to my bed in dream like that." The pilot then replied, "It cannot be, she is a human maid, her low voice makes you weep. She is some bride, or daughter of high birth, she can be naught beside." We passed the islets borne by wind and stream, and as we sailed the mariners came near and thronged around to listen. In gleam of the pale moon I stood, as one whom fear may not attaint, and my calm voice did rear, "Ye are all human, yon broad moon gives light to millions, who the self-same likeness wear. Even while I speak beneath this very night, their thoughts flow, unlike ours, in sadness or delight. What dream ye? Your own hands have built an home, even for yourselves on a beloved shore. For some fond eyes are pining till they come, how they will greet him when his toils are o'er, and laughing babes rush from the well-known door. Is this your care? Ye toil for your own good. Ye feel and think, has some immortal power such purposes, or in a human mood dream ye some power thus builds for man in solitude? What is that power ye mock yourselves, and given a human heart to what ye cannot know, as if the cause of life could think and live? 'Twere as if man's own works should feel and show the hopes and fears and thoughts from which they flow, and he be like to them. Lo, plague is free to waste, blight, poison, earthquake, hail and snow, disease and want, and worse necessity of hate and ill and pride and fear and tyranny. What is that power? Some moon-struck sophist stood, watching the shade of his own soul upthrown, fill heaven and darken earth. In such a mood, the form he saw and worshipped was his own, his likeness in the world's vast mirror shone, and 'twere an innocent dream, but that a faith nursed by fear's dew of poison grows thereon, and that men say that power has chosen death on all who scorn its laws to wreak immortal wrath. Men say that they themselves have heard and seen, or know from others who have known such things, a shade, a form, which earth and heaven between wields an invisible rod, that priests and kings, custom domestic sway, aye, all that brings man's freeborn soul beneath the oppressor's heel, are his strong ministers, and that the stings of death will make the wise his vengeance feel, though truth and virtue arm their hearts with tenfold steel. And it is said this power will punish wrong, yes, add despair to crime and pain, to pain and deep as hell and deathless snakes among, will bind the wretch on whom is fixed a stain, which like a plague, a burden and a bane, clung to him while he lived for love and hate. Virtue and vice, they say, are difference vain. The will of strength is right, this human state, tyrants that they may rule with lies thus desolate. Alas, what strength opinion is more frail than yon dim cloud now fading on the moon, even while we gaze, though it a while avail to hide the orb of truth, and every throne on earth or heaven, though shadow rests thereon, one shape of many names, for this ye plough the barren waves of ocean. Hence each one is slave or tyrant, all betray and bow, command or kill or fear or wreak or suffer woe. Its names are each a sign which maketh holy all power, aye, the ghost, the dream, the shade of power, lust, falsehood, hates, and pride and folly, the pattern whence all fraud and wrong is made, a law to which mankind has been betrayed, and human love is all, as the name well known, of a dear mother whom the murderer laid in bloody grave, and into darkness thrown, gathered her wildered babes around him as his own. O love, who to the hearts of wandering men are as the calm to ocean's weary waves, justice or truth or joy, those only can from slavery and religion's labyrinth caves guide us as one clear star the seaman saves, to give to all an equal share of good, to track the steps of freedom. Though through graves she passed, to suffer all in patient mood, to weep for crime, though stained with thy friend's dearest blood, to feel the peace of self-contentment's lot, to own all sympathies and outrage none, and in the inmost bowers of sense and thought, until life's sunny day is quite gone down, to sit and smile with joy, or not alone, to kiss salt tears from the worn cheek of woe, to live as if to love and live were one. This is not faith or law, nor those who bow to thrones on heaven or earth such destiny may know. But children near their parents tremble now, because they must obey. One rules another, and as one power rules both high and low, so man is made the captive of his brother, and hate is throned on high, with fear her mother, above the highest and those fountain cells, whence love yet flowed when faith had choked all other, are darkened woman, as the bond-slave dwells of man a slave, and life is poisoned in its wells. Man seeks for gold in mines that he may weave a lasting chain for his own slavery. In fear and restless care that he may live, he toils for others who must ever be the joyless thralls of like captivity. He murders for his chief's delight in ruin. He builds the altar that his idols fee. Maybe his very blood he is pursuing, O blind and willing wretch, his own obscure undoing. Women, she is his slave. She has become a thing, I weep to speak, the child of scorn, the outcast of a desolate home. Falsehood and fear and toil, like waves of worn channels upon her cheek with smiles adorn, as calm decks and false ocean. Well ye know what woman is, for none of woman born can choose but drain the bitter dregs of woe, whichever from the oppressed to the oppressors flow. This need not be, ye might arise, and will that gold should lose its power, and thrones their glory, that love which none may bind be free to fill the world like light, and evil faith grown hoary, with crime be quenched and die. Yon promontory even now eclipses the descending moon. Dungeons and palaces are transitory. High temples fade like vapour, man alone remains, whose will has power when all beside is gone. Let all be free and equal, from your hearts I feel an echo through my inmost frame. Like sweeter sound seeking its mate, it darts. Whence come ye, friends? Alas, I cannot name all that I read of sorrow, toil and shame on your warm faces, as in legends old, which make immortal the dark disastrous fame of conquerors and impostors false and bold. The discord of your hearts I in your looks behold. Whence come ye, friends, from pouring human blood forth on the earth? Or bring ye steel and gold, that kings may dupe and slay the multitude? Or from the famished poor, pale, weak and cold, bear ye the earnings of their toil? Unfold, speak, are your hands in slaughter's sanguine hue stained freshly? Have your hearts in guile grown old? Know yourselves thus, ye shall be pure as dew, and I will be a friend and sister unto you. Disguise it not, we have one human heart, all mortal thoughts confess a common home. Blush not for what may to thyself impart stains of inevitable crime. The doom is this, which has or may or must become thine and all humankind's. Ye are the spoil, which time thus marks for the devouring tomb. Thou and thy thoughts, and they, and all the toil wherewith ye twine the rings of life's perpetual coil. Disguise it not, ye blush for what ye hate, and enmity is sister unto shame. Look at your mind, it is the book of fate. Ah, it is dark with many a blazoned name of misery. All are mirrors of the same, but the dark fiend who with his iron pen, dipped in scorn's fiery poison, makes his fame enduring there, would o'er the heads of men pass harmless if they scorn to make their hearts his den. Yes, it is hate, that shapeless fiendly thing of many names, all evil, some divine, whom self-contained arms with a mortal sting, which when the heart is its snaky folds entwine, is wasted quite, and when it doth repine to gorge such bitter prey, on all beside it turns with ninefold rage, as with its twine when Amphisbaena some fair bird has tied, soon o'er the putrid mass he threats on every side. Reproach not thine own soul, but know thyself, nor hate another's crime, nor loathe thine own. It is the dark idolatry of self, which when our thoughts and actions once are gone, demands that man should weep and bleed and groan. O vacant expiation, be at rest. The past is death's, the future is thine own, and love and joy can make the foulest breast a paradise of flowers, where peace might build her nest. Speak thou, whence come ye? A youth made reply, wearily weary over the boundless deep we sail. Thou readest well the misery told in these faded eyes, but much dost sleep within, which there the poor heart loves to keep, or dare not write on the dishonoured brow. Even from our childhood have we learnt to steep the bread of slavery in the tears of woe, and never dreamed of hope or refuge until now. Yes, I must speak, my secret should have perished, even with the heart it wasted as a brand, fades in the dying flame, whose life it cherished, but that no human bosom can withstand. The wondrous lady and the mild command of thy keen eyes. Yes, we are wretched slaves, who from their wonted loves and native land are reft, and bear o'er the dividing waves the unregarded prey of calm and happy graves. We drag afar from pastoral vales the faintest, the fairest among the daughters of those mountains lone. We drag them there where all things best and rarest are stained and trampled. Years have come and gone since, like the ship which bears me, I have known no thought, but now the eyes of one dear maid on mine with light of mutual love have shone. She is my life, I am but as the shade of her, a smoke sent up from ashes soon to fade. For she must perish in the tyrant's hall. Alas, alas, he ceased, and by the sails sate cowering, but his sobs were heard by all, and still before the ocean and the gale the ship fled fast till the stars gun to fail. And round me gathered with mute countenance the seamen gazed, the pilot worn and pale with toil, the captain with grey locks, whose glance met mine in restless awe. They stood as in a trance. Recede not, pause not now, thou art grown old, but hope will make thee young. For hope and youth are children of one mother, even love behold. The eternal stars gaze on us. Is the truth within your soul? Care for your own, or ruth for others. Sufferings, do ye thirst to bear a heart which not the serpent custom's tooth may violate? Be free, and even here swear to be firm till death, they cried. We swear, we swear. The very darkness shook, as with a blast of subterranean thunder. At the cry, the hollow shore its thousand echoes cast into the night, as if the sea and sky and earth rejoiced with newborn liberty, for in that name they swore. Bolts were undrawn, and on the deck, with unaccustomed eye, the captives gazing stood, and every one shrank as the inconstant torch upon her countenance shone. They were earth's purest children, young and fair, with eyes the shrines of unawakened thought, and brows as bright as spring or morning, ere dark time had there its evil legend wrought in characters of cloud which wither not. The change was like a dream to them, but soon they knew the glory of their altered lot in the bright wisdom of youth's breathless noon. Sweet talk and smiles and sighs all bosoms did attune, but one was mute, her cheeks and lips most fair, changing their hue like lilies newly blown beneath the bright acacia's shadowy hair, waved by the wind amid the sunny noon, showed that her soul was quivering, and full soon that youth arose and breathlessly did look on her and me, as for some speechless boon. I smiled, and both their hands in mine I took, and felt a soft delight from what their spirits shook. The Revolt of Islam by Percy Bysshe Shelley, Canto 9. That night we anchored in a woody bay, and sleep no more around us dared to hover, than when all doubt and fear has passed away, it shades the couch of some unresting lover, whose heart is now at rest. Thus night passed over in mutual joy, around a forest grew of poplars and dark oaks, whose shade did cover the waning stars, pranked in the waters blue, and trembled in the wind which from the morning flew. The joyous mariners and each free maiden now brought from the deep forest many a bough, with woodland spoil most innocently laden. Soon wreaths of budding foliage seemed to flow over the mast and sails, the stern and prow were canopied with blooming boughs, the while on the slant sun's path o'er the waves we go rejoicing, like the dwellers of an isle doomed to pursue those waves that cannot cease to smile. The many ships, spotting the dark blue deep with snowy sails, fled fast as ours came nigh, in fear and wonder, and on every steep thousands did gaze. They heard the startling cry, like earth's own voice lifted unconquerably to all her children, the unbounded mirth, the glorious joy of thy name. Liberty they heard, as o'er the mountains of the earth from peak to peak leap on the beams of morning's birth. So from that cry over the boundless hills sudden was caught one universal sound, like a volcano's voice, whose thunder fills remotest skies. Such glorious madness found a path through human hearts, with stream which drowned its struggling fears and cares. Dark customs brewed, they knew not whence it came, but felt around a wide contagion poured. They called aloud on liberty, that name lived on the sunny flood. We reached the port, alas, from many spirits the wisdom which had waked that cry was fled, like the brief glory which dark heaven inherits from the false dawn, which fades ere it is spread, upon the night's devouring darkness shed. Yet soon bright day will burst, even like a chasm of fire, to burn the shrouds outworn and dead, which wrap the world, a wide enthusiasm to cleanse the fevered world, as with an earthquake's spasm. I walked through the great city then, but free from shame or fear. Those toil-worn mariners and happy maidens did encompass me, and like a subterranean wind that stirs some forest among caves, the hopes and fears from every human soul a murmur strange made as I passed, and many wept with tears of joy and awe, and winged thoughts did range, and half-extinguished words which prophesied of change. For with strong speech I tore the veil that hid nature and truth, and liberty and love, as one who from some mountain's pyramid points to the unrisen sun. The shades approve his truth, and flee from every stream and grove. Thus gentle thoughts did many a bosom fill, wisdom the mail of tried affections wove, for many a heart and tameless scorn of ill, thrice steeped in molten steel the unconquerable will. Some said I was a maniac wild and lost, some that I scarce had risen from the grave, the prophet's virgin bride, a heavenly ghost. Some said I was a fiend from my weird cave, who had stolen human shape, and o'er the wave, the forest and the mountain came. Some said I was the child of God, sent down to save women from bonds and death, and on my head the burden of their sins would frightfully be laid. But soon my human words found sympathy in human hearts, the purest and the best, as friend with friend made common cause with me, and they were few but resolute, the rest, ere yet success the enterprise had blessed, lead with me in their hearts, their meals, their slumber, their hourly occupations were possessed by hopes which I had armed to overnumber those hosts of meaner cares, which life's strong wings encumber. But chiefly women whom my voice did waken from their cold, careless, willing slavery, sought me, one truth, their dreary prison was shaken. They looked around and lo, they became free. Their many tyrants sitting desolately, in slave deserted halls, could none restrain. For wrath's red fire had withered in the eye, whose lightning once was death. Nor fear nor gain could tempt one captive now to lock another's chain. Those who were sent to bind me wept and felt their minds outsaw the bonds which clasped them round, even as a waxen shape may waste and melt in the white furnace, and a vision swound, a pause of hope and awe the city bound, which like the silence of a tempest's birth, when in all its awful shadow it was found, the sun, the wind, the ocean, and the earth hung terrible, there yet the lightnings have leaped forth. Like clouds unwoven in the silent night sky, by winds from distant regions meeting there, in the high name and truth and liberty around the city millions gathered were, by hopes which sprang from many a hidden lair, words which the law of truth in hues of flame arrayed, thy own world songs which in the air like homeless odours floated, a name of thee and many a tongue which thou hadst dipped in flame. The tyrant knew his power was gone, but fear the nurse of vengeance bade him wait the event, that perfidy and custom, gold and prayer, and whatsoever when force is impotent, to fraud the sceptre of the world has lent, might as he judged confirm his failing sway. Therefore throughout the streets the priests he sent to curse the rebels, to their gods did they, for earthquake, plague, and want kneel in the public way. And grave and hoary men were bribed to tell from seats where law is made the slave of wrong, how glorious Athens in her splendor fell, because her sons were free, and that among mankind the many of the few belong, by heaven and nature and necessity, they said, that age was truth, and that the young, marred with wild hopes and the peace of slavery, with which old times and men had quelled the vain and free. And with the falsehood of their poisonous lips, they breathed on the enduring memory of sages and of bards a brief eclipse. There was one teacher who necessity had armed with strength and wrong against mankind, his slave and his avenger I to be, that we were weak and sinful, frail and blind, and that the will of one was peace, and we should seek for naught on earth but toil and misery. For thus we might avoid the hell hereafter, so spake the hypocrites who cursed and lied. Alas, their sway was past, and tears and laughter clung to their hoary hair, withering the pride which in their hollow hearts dared still abide. And yet obscener slaves with smoother brow, and sneers of their straight lips thin, blue and wide, said that the rule of men was over now, and hence the subject's world to woman's will must bow. And gold was scattered through the streets, and wine flowed at 100 feasts within the wall. In vain the steady towers in heaven did shine, as they were wont, nor at the priestly call left plague her banquet in the ethnos hall, nor famine from the rich man's portal came, where at her ease she ever preys on all who throng to kneel for food, nor fear nor shame, nor faith nor discord dimmed hope's newly kindled flame. For gold was as a god whose faith began to fade, so that its worshippers were few, and faith itself, which in the heart of man gives shape, voice, name to spectral terror, knew its downfall as the altars lonelier grew, till the priest stood alone within the fane, the shafts of falsehood unpolluting flew, and the cold sneers of calumny were vain, the union of the free with discord's brand to stain. The rest thou knowest, lo, we too are here. We have survived a ruin wide and deep, strange thoughts are mine. I cannot grieve or fear, sitting with thee upon this lonely steep. I smile, though human love should make me weep. We have survived a joy that knows no sorrow, and I do feel a mighty calmness creep. over my heart, which can no longer borrow its hues from chance or change, dark children of tomorrow. We know not what will come yet, Leon dearest, Synthrope, shall we be the prophetess of love? Her lips shall rob thee of the grace thou wearest, to hide thy heart and clothe the shapes which rove within the homeless future's wintry grove. For I now, sitting thus beside thee, seem, even with thy breath and blood, to live and move, and violence and wrong are as a dream which rolls from steadfast truth, an unreturning stream. The blasts of autumn drive the winged seeds over the earth. Next come the snows and rain and frosts and storms which dreary winter leads out of his Scythian cave. A savage train, behold, spring sweeps over the world again, shedding soft dews from her ethereal wings, flowers on the mountains, fruits over the plain, and music on the waves and woods she flings, and love on all that lives, and calm on lifeless things. O spring of hope and love and youth and gladness, winged emblem, brightest, best and fairest, whence comest thou, when with dark winter's sadness the tears that fade in sunny smiles thou sharest? Sister of joy, thou art the child who wearest thy mother's dying smile, tender and sweet, thy mother autumn, for whose grave thou bearest fresh flowers, and beams like flowers with gentle feet, disturbing not the leaves which are her winding sheet. Virtue and hope and love like light and heaven surround the world, we are their chosen slaves. Has not the whirlwind of our spirit driven truth's deathless germs to thoughts remote as caves? Lo, winter comes, the grief of many graves, the frost of death, the tempest of the sword, the flood of tyranny, whose sanguine waves stagnate like ice at faith, the enchanter's word, and bind all human hearts in its repose abhorred. The seeds are sleeping in the soil meanwhile, the tyrant people's dungeons with his prey. Pale victims on the guarded scaffold smile, because they cannot speak, and day by day the moon of wasting science wanes away. Among her stars and in the darkness vast, the sons of earth to their foul idols pray, and grey priests triumph, and like blight or blast, a shade of selfish care our human looks is cast. This is the winter of the world, and here we die, even as the winds of autumn fade, expiring in the frore and foggy air. Behold, spring comes, though we must pass, who made the promise of its birth, even as the shade which from our death, as from a mountain, flings the future. A broad sunrise thus arrayed, as with the plumes of overshadowing wings, from its dark gulf of change, earth like an eagle springs. O dearest love, we shall be dead and cold before this morn may on the world arise. Wouldst thou the glory of its dawn behold? Alas, gaze not on me, but turn thine eyes on thine own heart. It is a paradise which everlasting spring has made its own. On while drear winter fills the naked skies, sweet streams of sunny thought and flowers fresh blown are there, and weave their sounds and odours into one. In their own hearts the earnest of the hope which made them great, the good will ever find, and though some envious shade may interlope between an effect and it, one comes behind, who the future to the past will bind, necessity whose sightless strength for ever evil with evil, good with good, must wind in bands of union with no power may sever. They must bring forth their kind and be divided never. The good and mighty of departed ages are in their graves, the innocent and free, heroes and poets and prevailing sages, who leave the vesture of their majesty to adorn the cloth, this naked world, and we are like to them, such perish, but they leave all hope, or love, or truth, or liberty, whose forms their mighty spirits could conceive, to be a rule and law to ages that survive. So be the turf heaped over our remains, even our happy youth, and that strange lot, whate'er it be, when in these mingling veins the blood is still, be ours. Let sense and thought pass from our being, or be numbered not among the things that are. Let those who come behind, for whom our steadfast will has bought a calm inheritance, a glorious doom, insult with careless tread our undivided tomb. Our many thoughts and deeds, our life and love, our happiness, and all that we have been immortally must live and burn and move. When we shall be no more, the world has seen a type of peace, and as some most serene and lovely spot to a poor maniac's eye, after long years some sweet and moving scene of youthful hope returning suddenly quells his long madness. Thus man shall remember thee. And calumny, what meanwhile shall feed on us, as worms devour the dead, and near the throne and at the altar, most accepted, thus shall sneers and curses be. What we have done, none shall dare vouch, though it be truly known, that record shall remain when they must pass who built their pride on its oblivion, and fame in human hope which sculptured was, survived the perished scrolls of unenduring brass. The while we too beloved must depart, and sense and reason, those enchanters fair, whose wand of power is hope, would bid the heart that gaze beyond the wormy grave despair. These eyes, these lips, this blood seems darkly there to fade in hideous ruin. No calm sleep peopling with golden dreams the stagnant air, seems our obscure and rotting eyes to steep in joy, but senseless death, a ruin dark and deep. These are blind fancies, reason cannot know, what sense can neither feel nor thought conceive. There is delusion in the world, and woe and fear and pain. We know not whence we live, or why, or how, or what moot power may give their being to each planet and star and beast, or even these thoughts come near me. I do weave a chain I cannot break. I am possessed with thoughts too swift and strong for one lone human breast. Yes, yes, thy kiss is sweet, thy lips are warm, O willingly beloved. With these eyes might they no more drink being from thy form, even as to sleep whence we again arise. Close their faint orbs in death, I fear nor prize aught that can now betide unshared by thee. Yes, love, when wisdom fails, makes thither wise. Darkness and death, if death be true, must be dearer than life, and hope, if unenjoyed with thee. Alas, our thoughts flow on with stream, whose waters return not to their fountain. Earth and heaven, the ocean and the sun, the clouds their daughters, winter and spring and morn and noon and even, all that we are or know is darkly driven towards one gulf. Lo, what a change is come since I first spake, but time shall be forgiven, though it change all but thee. She ceased, night's gloom meanwhile had fallen on earth from the sky's sunless dome. Though she had ceased, her countenance uplifted to heaven still spake with solemn glory. Bright her dark deep eyes, her lips whose motions gifted the air they breathed with love, her locks undight. Fair star of life and love, I cried, my soul's delight, why lookest thou on crystalline skies? Oh, that my spirit were yon heaven of night, which gazes on thee with its thousand eyes. She turned to me and smiled. That smile was paradise.